Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of second module of Nurturing Innovation and Startup Ecosystem. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Saji Gopinath with us today as a speaker, who is the CEO of the Kerala Startup Mission, the apex body of the government of Kerala, for supporting the technical entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem in the state of Kerala. Before joining Kerala Startup Mission in April 2017, he has served IIM Kozhikode for over 17 years as a professor, dean academic, and dean development. He has authored more than 30 research papers in leading academic journals, including International Journal of Project Management and also Journal of Financial Research, Journal of Indian Business Research, and Journal of Social Systems, etc. And today he would be giving a session on the learning from startup ecosystem and will give brief about what are the key ingredients that drive the startup ecosystem and how to build platform for supporting innovators. Also, what is the role of an enabler in the journey of startups and what are the policies, schemes for creating better opportunities. So now I would like to hand over the session to our speaker, Dr. Saji Gopinath, and share his experience and knowledge with our participants. So
good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this program. It's a pleasure to meet a large number of academics, incubation managers, people who are actually trying to create a very vibrant startup ecosystem in the country. I believe that you had great introduction to the program in the early stages, and today we will be looking at a little bit more detail on the startup ecosystem development, which basically try to help how do you develop some quality startups from our soil. Now, if you, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the fact that India today have got the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. We have close to around 50,000 odd startups, of which around 35,000 have been registered with DPIIT, but even those are not formally registered, numbers may be around 50 to 60,000. But while we have such a large number of startups, and many of them are actually unicorns, emerging unicorns and all, and the impact side, there is another study which is being done, which primarily put India in a little precarious position. I think we are rated below 20, and many of the smaller countries in the world are actually far ahead of us in that. So it's important that while we can increase the number, we also need to increase the impact the startups are making in the world. When Honorable Prime Minister launched the Startup India program a few years back, he mentioned that it's important that the startup solves the real problems around us. And in India, we have large-scale problems. And when a startup is actually going to address the real problems, we actually have a very win-win model where the country benefits, the startup benefits, and the whole development happens. It is in this context that I think we need to think about developing an ecosystem. And when you wanted to create an impact for startups, the academic institutions, the faculty members, the others who are involved in it plays a very, very key role. And from our experience in multiple areas of this, I would like to share some of my experience as we proceed. But primarily, I would like to put three themes to your consideration. I know that there are people who have been in the system for very long. There may be a few people who have come quite new. There may be people who have been hand-holding startups. There may be some startups themselves who are trying to develop the product. Sorry. So I was primarily saying that what we will look at in the next hour and a half, and if you have some questions, you can stop me in between also. Maybe you can raise a hand and we can have a discussion. Otherwise, we can have the discussion at the end. We'll look at three things. The first theme, of course, we discussed. I'm sure that we will discuss in the other session. So I will not go into too much detail into that. But finally, I will focus a little bit more on the role academics play on embracing the entrepreneurship, and especially in a world which is now getting disrupted. Now, when you speak about disruption today, people will think only about COVID, but more than COVID, there are many other factors which is actually redefining the way the business is actually growing. That's the reason why you see that very, very small places in the world actually come out with very impressive products. Estonia being one, or Finland, or so very small countries come out with very interesting startups and companies which come out with interesting products. So there is a big amount of disruption happening all around us, and so what could be the motivation for embracing entrepreneurship is something which we look at. Then we look at which is basically where we need to have more time and discussions, where we look at the path to the entrepreneurship, both specifically when you look at startups. Every entrepreneurship idea is not a startup. There is some characteristic of the startup which is different from entrepreneurship. Maybe a MSME item, MSME unit or a startup, there are some differences. So how do you actually create impactful startups using academic infrastructure, and what are the roles academic institutions can play to build this brick by brick from the college days? Something which we look at in the second one, and that's actually lead us to the question of the larger role of an ecosystem, which is important. When you speak about an ecosystem, we speak about institutions, we speak about investors, we speak about customers, we speak about validators, vendors. All of them come as a part of the larger ecosystem, and an academic institution can play a very important role over there. Many of you will be knowing that it's a Stanford University and Silicon Valley. That is basically where there is a good amount of reinforcement which happens between these two. It's created maybe one of the world's very vibrant ecosystems called Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley helped the university, university in turn helped the Silicon Valley. So you have such examples where the universities are leading big into the startup ecosystem. So that's something which we'll be looking at as we proceed, because as I said, we require, our objective is to create a large number of very impactful, very, very resourceful startups who addresses the real problem, who actually help India march towards Atmanirbhar in a big way. So that's basically the context in which we will be looking at. So when you ask this question of why entrepreneurship, I'm sure that different parts of the country, different people have got different ways of looking at it. People may think that I can have my own boss, I create something new. And while we speak about this, there is still a large number of people who, especially studying in colleges, who would like to take up a career, not in entrepreneurship. They may try to take up a job, they may try to take up higher studies and things like that. But in a country like India today, when we look at the way the country is developing, there is a very, very key element where the entrepreneurship is important. So I'll start with India, then I go to the globe, and then come to specifically on the topic which we are discussing. This is a study done by Asim Premji University. Some of you may be Asim Premji University. It's primarily education. And Asim Premji University basically mapped the way the job growth, and what I mean is formal job growth happens while an economy grows in India, in Indian context. And interestingly, what is found is that in 1970s, when an economy grows by a percentage, that's what the blue line shows, you see that the jobs grow almost by 0.8%. So when the economy was growing by 4.6%, jobs were growing at 2.6%. So almost 80%. So for 1% growth of GDP, there is an 8.8% growth of employment. But when it came to 2015, which is where the study was looked at, you see that that is drastically changed. Even when the economy is growing at an average of 6.8% during that period, the job growth was only around 0.6%. That means for 1% of growth, you are only growing 0.1%. So there is actually this is nothing surprising, because when any economy grows in a faster rate, the nature of entrepreneurship changes. And we will come to that later. Especially, I'm sure there are academics who are working in the area of economics and many other areas can understand this. We actually move to an efficiency type of a model, where the growth rate of an organization need not necessarily have to create a large number of jobs. But at the same time, it might create wealth. It may create a lot of informal jobs. So the point which I want to stress here is that India has actually reached a stage where our growth need not be actually job-led. So you will require more of wealth creators rather than people who are taking up the jobs. The other aspects of positives of entrepreneurship is what must have been normally being discussed. I'm not speaking about that. So this is at one end. The second aspect, specifically today's context, is when you look at the world, the way the world is moving, we know that the last century was about globalization. Before that, we know that the first diagram shows, we actually have everything being limited to smaller villages, and whenever villages produce something excess, it actually gets shipped to the another village or maybe to another part of the world, another part of the country, typically through the shipping means. So in other words, production was concentrated on few areas, small areas, continuous production, small industries. Last century made the difference, because of fast moving, fast mobility, thanks to the engineering advantages, a lot of mechanical engineers, electronics engineers, and many others. There's a lot of people actually started moving very fast. Because people movement becomes very fast, you actually see large clusters of industries actually happening in different parts of the world. And that is basically where you have big companies which is coming in. Now, COVID, which accelerated what we call as anti-globalization movement or nationalism or protectionism movement, actually started creating something called smaller pockets of excellences again. So you still see that, you will see global jobs, which was basically the in thing of last century, is actually going to change to a lot of local entrepreneurship opportunities. So at one end, you see the Indian jobs versus the growth is changing. Second, you see that there is a big change in the global jobs, and there's a lot of local entrepreneurship opportunities which are coming, which is also an important element for people like us who are a part of academies, where we generally train our people to take up jobs. We need to naturally start looking at how do they take up entrepreneurship activities per se. The third important element which we need to look at is on the technology front. Whenever we speak about technology, we believe that the technology is only for engineers or people who are in technical streams. Not necessarily the case. Any field actually adopt technology. See, for example, I'm sure that people sitting there may be some professors from commerce, there are some professors from arts, science, etc. We have adopted online education in all of this. So we may use newer technologies in our own field. So technology become an enabler. But the important thing is, different periods of growth of in history, there are different technologies which have drove the development. It was textile technology initially. You know, Ahmedabad was very famous for textiles. Mumbai was very famous for textiles, because textile technology was the one which was driving the economy. Globally, Manchester was considered to be a technology hub. European dominance on economical wealth happened around the textile industry. This was what happening during the first industrial revolution, which lasted maybe 1700, 1750s to maybe 1890, that period. Then came the locomotive, and so then came the automobile. The last century, the American growth has happened. The American economy grew because the automobile industry became a very strong over there. And based on the automobile industry's production philosophies, a lot of newer things have happened. The education systems have changed across the world. All of them have come. Since that's not our topic, I'm not going into the detail of that, but later if somebody wants to have a discussion, we can discuss on that. Then today, if you remember, if you ask anyone, the names of companies which comes to our mind, large companies in the world which comes to our mind, names which comes to our mind maybe Amazon or Microsoft or Google or things like that, right? Apple and things like that. None of them are actually manufacturing economy companies. These are all new knowledge economy companies, or what we call as the part of the Silicon Revolution. The American dominance continued, Chinese dominance started coming up because of the Silicon Revolution. So you can see that each revolution actually brings in newer parts of the world into the prominence. But more importantly, the time period of each of revolution also is shrinking. Textile technology remained very long period, maybe 100, 200 years. Automobile also remained for around 100 years. When you came to computer revolution or silicon revolution, it is shorter, maybe 25 years. And now we are moving to the fourth industrial revolution, a revolution where artificial intelligence, future technologies are going to define it. They will be very, very short. They may come up in 3 years, 5 years, etc. Now, we ourselves know this. If you think about when did we buy a computer, after the computer was invented, maybe after 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. But we must have got a mobile phone, maybe 5 years after it has come to the world, or 10 years after it has come to the world. So the technology adoption cycle is reducing very, very drastically. Because of this, there is a possibility of a new world where all the three type of subjects or disciplines which we speak about, the physical discipline, the digital, biological, all of them are actually coming together and they create disruption into the whole ecosystem. So much so that many of the jobs which we do actually get disrupted through this. Now, this is an important thing because just like textile technology brought in economic growth, it also displaced a lot of handloom workers. The automobile technology brought in a lot of positives, but it also displaced horse drivers and others who are doing it. Computers, which has brought in a lot of changes, has reduced mailmen, right? We see that there are no people need to deliver the mails, or you don't need people to type. The typewriters have been gone. So every technology disrupts a lot of jobs. And we see that just like physical labor has been disrupted by in the past by machines. The last century, the machines replace a substantial amount of mechanical labor. The new revolution is going to disrupt the cognitive labor. So much so that in future, many jobs, you may come with an advertisement like humans need not apply. Now, some of you, especially faculty members who are in various domains, need not necessarily be in engineering domain, be in art, science, creative domains. I strongly advocate that you watch this video. This is a video available in YouTube. The title is Humans Need Not Apply, which actually compares what happened in the last century with what is going to happen in the future. Now, when you see a large number of jobs are going out of people, there is a need for people to create new things. And that is basically where the entrepreneurship becomes very important. So before I go further into my talk, let me just share a personal story or a personal experience just to give you a flavor of why all these things are actually creating negative, how this is going to create positive in the other side also. Later I will share this with a slide also. Now you can see at one end you see humans need not apply. The other end, I'm showing you a business magazine, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. This business magazine is Business Today, very popular magazine. And the front of the magazine, the cover page of the magazine, we had a picture of two kids. They're actually kids because they passed out of graduation in 2017, and this edition which I'm showing you is early 2019 or 2018. Now, why two youngsters right from the college are there? And both of them are incidentally from Kerala, our startup ecosystem. So there are many others like that who just come. The reason is simple. These kids are actually from the college. They were actually nurtured in the college. They were nurtured in the college into newer technologies. They studied not in a big town. They study in a small rural village. They are coming from not any business families, not from very highly well-to-do families. They're coming from very ordinary families, no resources with them, almost zero resources with them, normal technical college. And in the college, they developed a product, a very crude product using the newer technologies, supported by the ecosystem. Later, we will see the details of that. And when they passed out, being good students, they also got good jobs. But at the same time, the chief minister of the state saw a picture in a newspaper. Our honorable chief minister actually saw a picture in a newspaper, nothing to do with these kids. So a newspaper where it was a picture of a person standing in a manhole, manholes, the drainage hole, and cleaning it. So the person was standing in filth, cleaning it, sort of a manual scavenging job. Very, very dirty job, literally a very dirty job. So we know that when we walk out and we see an open drain, we actually cover our mouth and nose. Think about people who are actually getting into that, cleaning it. In India, today we have close to around 3.2 million people who are doing that job. 32 lakh people are doing such a job. So when our honorable CM saw this picture, he said that this is a bad job. It's important that we need to actually use the technology to address this sort of an issue, because it's a very, very live social issue. And he actually poses as a problem to the ecosystem. Can you actually come out with a solution? Because we read in newspapers, people getting into drain holes and then they die because of pollution and things like that. So we pose this as a challenge to the ecosystem. And these two children who passed out of the college, they had some basic training in entrepreneurship. Even though they got jobs, they thought that this is a very, very important problem to solve. Couple of reasons. A, it's a very important problem to help people, social problem. But more importantly, when you think about 32 lakh people doing this job, and even after that our brains are clogged, if I replace that with machines, think about the type of volume of business in that. 32, 3.2 million people, let's say they do 200 days in a year or 300 days in a year, and they are getting paid around 300 or 400 rupees per day. It's a 16,000 crore opportunity. So the business is not a small business, it's a very, very large business. And there is no solution. Absolutely no solution in the country, except that somebody can come and suck it, that's all. And that is not very effective because many times only the water comes, the sludge remains there, you have a problem. And so they have no resources and they only have such a problem in hand. So this is basically where an ecosystem plays a very important role. So because this problem is a very live problem, later I will tell you how ecosystems play, and their college, which supported them, approached state agency, where we thought that this is an important problem for them to work on. So give a small grant, very small grant, where they were able to buy smaller product parts, fabricate it, create a product, and proper support, mentoring, etc. by the government departments and others were given. So to cut the whole thing short, 2017 July they started this. 2018 February they created a product, and the person whose picture came almost a year back in the newspaper, where he was cleaning it, completely filled in the filth and cleaning the drain, the same person operated the machine in the presence of Honorable Chief Minister to clean the drain without getting into the drain. So you have actually empowered a person to do his job, but without actually taking the risk of it. So product became a success. It's big, huge. They had to re-engineer it. They re-engineered it. In that year, 2018, October 2nd, Honorable Prime Minister, because this product is a very important product for the country, especially as part of Switch Bharat, Honorable Prime Minister, along with the UN Secretary General, launched this from the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So what I was trying to say is that this is a power of today's entrepreneurship. The power of today's entrepreneurship is that where your knowledge can actually translate into very successful product, which can actually get accepted very fast across the country. To make the thing short, today, 3 years down the line from when the day started, they are a 200 crore company operating in 12 states in the country. Even during the COVID period, they do not disrupt their production, continue the production, and these kids who got jobs, good jobs, because they were good students, must have now earning at least 5, 10, 15 times what they could have got if they were in a job at the same time. So this power of technology, the power of new knowledge to come out with newer products is something which the today's world offers. And the question in front of all of us is how do we enable our children, our students, our wards, our people to lead this new world? Just like what this company called Gen Robotics is. There are many other stories. I'm sure that in your colleges itself you will have interesting stories like this to share. A lot of people have been are there in different parts of the country. We were very happy where one of our startups product has actually been featured among the top 10 COVID products in the world, which is actually being used for in the early stages of the COVID thing. So I'm sure that such products are there from each of our ecosystems. Now, how do we create more of that? And how does an ecosystem can play a role in that? What is the role teachers, academicians can play on that? How can we actually lead this new wave of growth? Remember, India could not lead first industrial revolution because we were under the British. We could not lead even the second industrial revolution. Again, we were under the British. We did not have a manufacturing prowess because of that. We still don't have made in India as a big brand in the world. Even the third industrial revolution, that is the computer revolution, we could at least follow. Even though we have not led, we did not develop great products, but we have phenomenally great services came out of it. Now is the role for us to lead the next industrial revolution. We need to actually lead. And to lead that, the academia, the intellectual wealth has to be converted into the product and services. So that is the context in which we are basically looking at. So how do we lead this new world? Now, I'm sure that many of you, or most of you sitting here, in different parts of India, I believe, even though there's a large number of people are from Gujarat, and I started my career in Gujarat, so I know the type of business environment there and the type of support the Gujarat gives for the business. But that's not necessarily the case in many other parts of the country. So if you look at, as a whole, when you look at entrepreneurship, we always start looking at entrepreneurship from different angles. Most of this entrepreneurship is about value addition. And when you think about value addition, the common model which we do is we adopt something which others are doing. Right? So somebody is making a pen, we will also make a pen. Somebody is making a product, my company also will make a similar product. So it's something like a very similar sort of thing. Then we may actually adapt it, slightly modify it. Maybe we will add some frills, we will add some small changes, etc. So in these two cases, and if you look at our enterprises in the country or in the world, for example, the larger chunk is imitation. A large number of people making the similar products out of it. Some people making some changes in the product. They're all entrepreneurship. They all add value. I'm making a steel. Somebody else also is making a steel, maybe more efficiently, more cost effective. I make a particular product. Other person also making a similar product, maybe with a different brand, but the content might be the same. Maybe with small changes as such. But today we also speak about two other things. One is innovate. It's important that we need to actually start looking at innovation. What do you do by innovation? Innovation is something where the product or a service actually get remodeled, modified to address a very different and very large market. A market which we were not addressing earlier. Maybe because of cost, maybe because of access, maybe because of whatever reasons. So you try to innovate could be through technology, through design, it could be through reducing features, adding features. All of them could be examples of that. I'm sure as teachers, we all know about innovation, but if somebody is still not clear about the difference between innovation and invention, the invention is something where you are finding, you are discovering something new, you are inventing something new, you are developing something new. Academic institutions are extremely good in doing that. They actually invent something. But academic institutions are also good in innovating it, coming out with product features which addresses the other products per se. Zoom is a good example of an innovation, right? Even though we have standard products available, the Zoom came with a very different level of innovation. In Indian context, think about a product like Khadi, which Mahatma Gandhi used to promote. And we know that when you think about Khadi, we think about product where you need to provide subsidies, you need to provide handhold support, we need to provide specific bazaar and things like that, right? But think about a world where a same Khadi cloth sells without subsidy at a very high cost with a huge amount of fashion. That is basically where I'm positioning the same product in a very different manner and innovating on the product. And we have Fab India, for example, who actually did that very effectively, very efficiently. So, Khadi product, positioned differently, ad design, nice showrooms, etc. You actually unclog the different market. I gave you this example because just to give you a concept that it is not necessarily that every innovation should be based upon technology. It's also about other things which can add it into a product or a service. Now, when we speak about startups, we are speaking about these two things, the innovation and the inventions. Adoption are needed, but they are not coming typically under the startup domain. They come more as entrepreneurs, enterprises. Okay, so they come basically as this is a world of startups. So what is the advantage of this? This is not an imitation of something. So it's actually unclogging a new market. Because it is unclogging a new market, you are basically, if it is successful, you suddenly started getting a huge amount of sales, huge amount of volume, and scalability become an essential thing. Some product or service which is not available, and you suddenly come out with that solution. Uber or Ola is an example, right? We wanted a taxis. Whenever we wanted taxis, we always thought that we need to go to a taxi stand. Many times when you go to a taxi stand, and if the taxi is not there, we have a problem. So you suddenly somebody came up with a solution saying that I will bring you taxi. I won't own any taxi, but I will actually aggregate the taxis and give to you. And using your mobile, it is accessible from anywhere in the world. So this should have been completely failed because the person who started did not have any taxi of his own. He don't have any assets. So it so happened that when you call through this platform, the driver may not reach because anyway it is not owned by the taxi company, right? The driver may not come. Quite possible. So it would have failed. But it succeeded. It reduced the cost of operation. Because it's reduced the cost of operation, scaled up very fast. So startups by nature has got that. It has got a high risk of failure, but if it succeeds a lot. When you look at adopt and adapt, the risk of failure is small, but even if it succeeds, the volume it can generate, the profit it can generate, the value it can generate is actually limited. But please note that in the world, like the size shows, you have more of adoptions, adaptations than innovations and inventions. The reason why we need more impactful startups is we want more innovation and more inventions to come into the picture. And that is something which we'll discuss in the next. So why are we requiring this? If you go back to my original graph which I've shown you, where the Asim Premji study I have shown you, Asim Premji University study I have shown you, when you think about entrepreneurship, some of you professors who may not be entrepreneurship professors, you must have studied somewhere in literature saying that entrepreneurship is when you think about factors of production, we speak about land, labor, capital, and things like that. That is basically what we call as a factor-based entrepreneurship. The factor-based entrepreneurship was the key thing in entrepreneurship all these years. But when an economy grows fast, we move from factor-based entrepreneurship to efficiency-based entrepreneurship to innovation-based entrepreneurship. So we need to move from efficiency-based entrepreneurship, factor-based entrepreneurship to innovation-based entrepreneurship. That is the reason why you require an ecosystem. And that innovation anywhere in the world is always being driven not from the industry, it is always driven by the academics. Because academicians by nature have been trained to look at, to think differently, question, address the constraints, and come out with new things. And that movement is basically where we wanted more innovations. And innovations and academic startups go hand in hand. And this is basically where I think, as faculty members, we need to, as academicians, we need to actually foster a new culture of startups in the country. Because there's a paradox. What's the paradox? We have brilliant professors, lot of researchers, lot of interesting products which have happened. I was part of TechQ program, some of you may be knowing. As a TechQ program, I was talking to a professor in a very remote corner of Punjab, not very far from the border. And I found that the professor has already developed a very effective, maybe country's most effective 3D printer. But what happened? He got a DST grant, he developed it, he published a paper, and that's it. It is drying there. If that product is unclogged, and if you take it to across the country, not only that, lot of our colleges can use that, it also generates name for him, revenue for the college, and more than that, it helps the whole country benefit from that. So this is one example. I'm sure if you go back and look at your own colleges, you see a large number of lab experiments, research which has been done through many of the 100 projects, or sometimes even without 100 projects, which are actually waiting to be unclogged. And that what the Honorable Principal Scientific Advisor to Honorable Prime Minister says that it's a dark fiber. You know what is a dark fiber, right? The dark fiber is a fiber which is not being used. It's just lying there. And this, the moment you started using it, you will actually get a lot of value on that. So the country has a huge amount of such dark fiber in research, in academic institutions. It's time that we need to sweat that. To sweating this dark fiber, where just like when you connect an equipment to a fiber, it gives you the light, it is time that we need to connect startups from the students to our research, to the work we do, so that it can be scaled up and taken across the country per se. So what I want to say again is that if you are a college, a startup starting a shop is entrepreneurship. Nothing wrong in that. That's not what a college or academic entrepreneurship system is supposed to do. An academic startup ecosystem should actually help the student to leverage on the IP of the college. The IP is generated in the college. The IP is generated by the faculty. IP is generated in the research labs to come out with huge products. Because we have enough and more problems. I'll give you another example of this. Surprisingly to many of you, Kerala, even though it's one of the most green places in the country, it also has got one of the states in the country that have least amount of good quality water. And this as per the WHO definition. We still depend on a lot of open wells, which are not considered to be very healthy. Now, he actually wanted a very simple solution to purify the water. The country has solutions which are centralized. When you have a large number of open wells, we wanted a solution which is decentralized. We were searching for the solution across the country, across many places. And we found that one college in Orissa actually had developed it. But again, another research project, another professor, beautiful project. He has come out with one of the best filters in the country. But after that, it's not there, nothing. It's just being presented as a paper and kept there. The moment you convert that product, obviously you need to have some changes to that, to a product. You suddenly actually find that the Jal Jeevan mission, or Honorable Prime Minister's vision of providing good quality water to the world, can actually be to the all Indian households, can actually become a very, very effective thing. Now, this sort of solutions are existing in all of us. We need to sweat it. We need to convert them into enterprises. And that is basically where academic entrepreneurs come into the picture. If you look at the innovation chain, we speak about various levels. TRL means technology readiness level. So technology readiness level moves from one level to another level. Most of our college products, which faculty doing, research people are doing, and others doing, are at technology readiness level around 3 or 4. Sometimes maybe earlier, 3 or 4. For an industry, it should be 8 or 9. This period, walking from TRL 4 to TRL 8, is basically where the technology can translate into action. And that is basically where you require scalable products. Startups can do that. Collaboration between industry and academia can come through the startups. The students can experiment it, students can modify it, provided you provide an ecosystem for that. So to make it short, you see there is a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities. You will also see that there is a need for entrepreneurship opportunities. We believe that at this context, there is a very, very strong need for academic research or findings to translate into the wealth asset, sweating the dark fiber. And that is basically where we speak about disruptive innovations. And the focus of academic institutions have to be disruptive innovations. Disruptive innovations which create, the example of Gen Robot is a disruptive innovation. It actually disrupts an age-old way we were actually handling one of our literally dirty work. It disrupted that. Zoom disrupted the education. Again, you see that so it could be create a new thing, or it should be innovate incrementally to adopt it. All these are possible in this. If you look at some of you fact professors who are working in the area of innovation knows this diagram, very famous diagram on disruptive innovation. Typically, what happened is that you see in the left diagram, I'm just putting your academics, that's why I'm just putting this diagram. Normally, you have one innovation which is going the blue line. Normally, what is happening? Let's say Microsoft Teams, for example, or Skype, for example. It was happening that way. Then somebody come out with a different model. They may not address a professional group, they may address somebody else. They find out that you can actually start at a very different market, very different level assets. But after some time, the disruptive innovation cut across and becomes the key thing. Many things which we take today as products and services can actually be challenged like this. See, if you look at in the past, you see that only when you wanted to take when you want to travel, you only take a camera, right? You take only a professional camera or a good camera. But since somebody came out and said that let me put the camera in the mobile phone, the people who are proper photographers say that that's useless, it won't work. So the first innovation of camera is something like this. But camera in a mobile phone is something like the green line. But very soon, camera in the mobile phones became so good that a lot of people who were earlier using it also started adopting it. This is something which colleges can do. Look at the products which we have and start looking at and question and say that can we actually come out with product and services which actually challenge the existing product and services and disrupt it through the thing. Won't they fail? The answer is yes, they may fail. And that is why ecosystem is required. That's why they have to be done in the college. Because in colleges, in academic institutions, failure is okay. You are only trying to create that interest, create that model of coming out with something completely new and move as it. Because if you look at the new process of education requires all these three things. Knowing, where we teach theory, formula, models, etc. Many times what we know can actually be understood only when we start doing it. We generally do it in labs. But the real value comes when you be a part of it. And in Kerala, for example, just like Gujarat has got a very strong student startup innovation program, Kerala has also a program which is called as Innovation Entrepreneurship Development Program. We position it as a very learning element as such. I still remember a student of mine, a student entrepreneur who told me that had I actually started doing my startup in my first year of college, I should have understood most of the subjects far better than what I knew now, because I will have to apply that. And that is basically where the new model of education, which NEP also speak about a bit, where you move from learning from classroom to be combined with learning in labs and learning in internships and startups. So we spoke about three things. We spoke about why entrepreneurship is required. We spoke about how academic institutions can actually play developing many meaningful startups. And we move to the third level where we are start looking at this is a part of education. Now in the next 15 minutes, and then I will open up for questions, what we are going to look at is how do we actually create those startups per se? And how do we develop the sustainable startups from academic institutions? And that's basically where the startup ecosystem becomes an important element. And what is the role the startup ecosystem provides? Is it just an incubator, or you need to have something more than that? Is it that the college has an incubator and incubator will do everything? The college don't own it, or the larger society won't own it. Is that way we can actually develop it? This is something which we will see in the next element of this. So from whatever we discussed so far, let me categorize good startups, whatever we discussed, in an entrepreneurship canvas. We adapt, adopt, innovate, invent canvas. Startups can be placed somewhere there, where the value addition is high, huge, but risk of failure also is very high. So if it succeeds, it makes money, become big, it actually can create values. Byju's is a good example, right? All of us know that. In a matter of 8-9 years, the company has become huge, very, very large. It actually grew very fast. It's successful, so it grew fast. Amazon, Flipkart, all of them are examples. Dunzo, all of them are examples of companies which actually grew very fast because they are successful. You have a lot of startups which have failed. Yes, there are many which have failed also. Now, what the question we need to ask is the difference between a startup and entrepreneurship. I think is clear now. Every startup is an entrepreneurship, but every entrepreneurship or every enterprise is not a startup enterprise. Startup generally take technology for scalability, and again, technology means not necessarily technology means IT product. It can actually be a product in literature, it can be a product in history, it can be a product in tourism, but it uses a technology for scalability, innovation. It uses knowledge, business models. It has some, I'll come to that risk funding very soon. What is it? It generally may not have too much of assets, and outcome is exponential growth if it's successful, large scale employment, and high rate of return. So what do an ecosystem should do? The ecosystem should do, ideally, is to pull this down. If your ecosystem is efficient, you actually will have something like this. What's that? You have startups with high value addition, but very low risk. In other words, the role an ecosystem plays, the role an academic institution plays, the role faculty plays, the role other mentors and others play in developing a startup is to minimize the risk of startup. I was talking to a friend of mine sometime back, and he asked me, how can a high risk startup can leverage an ecosystem to reduce it? Let's start in a simple example. What is the risk of failure we are speaking about? Let's think about a student of yours, a student group of yours starts a startup, and they are actually coming out with a new model of, let's say, transportation. Let's say new model of electric vehicle. So they develop, they use a lab, they need software, they need hardware, they develop, they simulate, they come to a fabrication, they might buy machines, they develop the car, electric vehicle, they do some battery assembly and all, and at the end they find that it is not working. It's not working, or it's not giving the type of power it has to give. The amount of time they have invested, the amount of investment they have invested is actually going to be lost, because they must have taken a loan to buy the machine, they must have taken a loan to buy the material, the software, the hardware, all of them, right? So when they fail with a huge debt in hand. This is what was happening in the past. So what people used to do, they won't take such risky ventures unless you have a support system which actually supports such risky ventures. They generally take what others are doing. So instead of making an electric vehicle, if I run a taxi company, it's easy because others are also doing it. I have assets to pledge, no problem. Let's take, but please note, if this electric vehicle was successful, it would have actually grown very fast, right? Extremely good benefit. So how can we actually minimize it? Many ways of doing it. First question we need to ask is, why should the student buy this software or hardware? We have laboratories, colleges got laboratories, can't we share that? We have academic versions of licenses of software, initial simulations can be done there. Even later, as an institutions, we can actually tie up and get a lower cost software for them. It can be shared across people. We can actually allow our incubators space for them to develop it. Materials can actually be bought or be shared, or sensors can be shared, because anyway we can reuse many of them. So in other words, many of the elements of the cost we can actually absorb. So the risk of failure actually reduces. We may have a fantastic electric department in our college. There may be professors who are expert in electric vehicles. Their time can actually add a huge value to make this product better. You may have a campus where this can actually be tested. Again, that reduces the risk. So in other words, the moment you actually pool the resources around around us and provide shared resources, our risk reduces. There are many other ways of doing it also, but that reduces assets. That's what the ecosystem provides. So ecosystem's role is, how do you reduce the risk of it? The moment you see that, yes, even after that can it fail? Yes, it can fail. So what will be the impact of it? The student group which tried to do it, could not make a product, they pass out. They take a job. Even otherwise they would have done it, even if they have not attempted this. But please note, this process must have educated them substantially well. If they are successful, you actually have great product coming out of our colleges course. So how do you do that? To do that, we need to curate a comprehensive ecosystem. And how do we curate a comprehensive ecosystem is something which we need to see in the next 15 minutes. And for that, we need to ask this question to all of us. What is that prevents our students, our stakeholders to come out with great startups? Why are they, I'm not saying everywhere, but in many places, why are they actually taking a job when they could have started something by their own? If you are a high ranking student and got a good job, you don't go for entrepreneurship. You take up a job. Why do they do it? So this is basically where I think various aspects we have to play in the playbook of creating entrepreneurship. So our experience, we found that there are several challenges to a startup creation. Please note, the startup is what I meant, that's what I discussed so far. And as I should mention that why we require such type of startups. And this varies. But generally, these are the factors which they're available in different parts. Because we work with some of the Northeast economies, have reasonably good leeway, or work with southern India startup ecosystems. And the first is, it's a motivation issue. People are not really motivated to take an entrepreneurship. They find a large number of problems in entrepreneurship. What are the problems? Okay, there's no secure job, no secure income. The income will come to me after a very long period of time. My opportunity cost is very large. It takes more time for me to succeed. The perception issues are there in some part of India. That if you get a job, go for a job. Job is considered to be great. Not necessarily everywhere, some part of India. But please note, these are all now not true. That's the reason why I gave you the example of the company earlier itself. What these kids now earn is far, far more than what their contemporaries must have been earning today. What the investment they have to make, they didn't have any money to make investment. But there was an ecosystem which has supported them, and then a lot of people have actually supported them. So the motivation element is many times because of the perceptions. No, this is not real. Some of them are real, but most of them are not real. They are perceptions. Perception that this is problematic, this may fail, the chances of failure is there, there's a huge debt, what will I do? My opportunity cost is high. But if you are having knowledge in your area and you have properly done your homework, that is not an issue. But having said that, the second element is very important. Many times, students may not have great ideas. They may be actually doing things which are available in the YouTube or Google. They Google it and find out an idea and then think that that is a great idea. And you cannot blame the students for that because they are not exposed to it. They are not exposed to the real problems. So we see, if you take 100 startups, especially coming from academic institutions, almost 70 of them may be working on ideas which are not very relevant. So, for example, people will say that, okay, I go to a hospital and I find a long queue. Okay, let me develop a OP software, outpatient management software. But the real problem in a hospital may not be outpatient management. The real problem may be biomedical waste management, which is a big, big problem. If you come out with a solution, which is an effective solution for biomedical waste management, you actually have a large market than an OP solution per se. So the idea actually has to come from depth of knowledge. And where is the depth of knowledge comes in the ecosystem? It can come from industry problems. It can come from the faculty, academic knowledge. It can even come from the academic and industry collaborations. When an academician speaks to an industry and they find this is a problem, that can actually be converted into a product idea or a startup. But even after that, today's world requires high-end skill sets. So, for example, one of the company in South India developed an interesting product. A lot of Indian women, especially during their maternity, have problems of anemia, and because of that, the children are malnutrition. Right? This is a challenge which they find, and they find that this actually creates a huge problem for the country per se. And why is it so? Because these are remote villages, very difficult for a doctor to reach, or they may not be available to enough available to doctors are not there and things like that. So they developed a very interesting product. They used this product where you can use your mobile phone and take the picture of your eyes, and it can backend in a cloud, it analyzes and tells you whether you are anemic or not. Do some prescription. Looks very simple, but this requires good, deeper knowledge of pattern recognition, deeper knowledge of vision analysis, and things like computer vision and things like that. You need to actually have an app which captures it properly. A lot of technical challenges may be there. Same is the case with another non-technical product also. The point is, you require skills to do that. Many times you don't have the skills to do that. The skills which we provide in the colleges, and most of the colleges actually provide more of knowledge than the skills, right? We as higher education institutions, our primacy is primarily to provide more of knowledge than the skills. So in the new world, you require both knowledge and skills. So the skills have to be complemented with the knowledge which you do. We cannot compromise it. We cannot say that, okay, tomorrow onwards we'll only have skills in the colleges. You require skills and knowledge, but you require supplementary things which actually provide skills along with the knowledge the colleges provide. So that is another thing. The next thing, which is many times very challenging for a startup, is that all said and done, they need money. So there are not enough resources. Where do they get resources? And if you are doing something which others have done, it's very easy for you to get money, because you can actually go to a bank, and bank will provide you the loans. While bank has seen another 10 people who are doing this, so they know that what are the risks in that, and they do it. Suppose you go there and say that I'm developing something very new, they will not accept it, because they don't know whether this is going to be successful. Even if it's successful, whether this customer will buy it, even if customer buys it, whether this will work function, they don't give you. So the typical model of an entrepreneurship where you are thinking about a debt fund may not work in this model. You require a different model. And this is basically where academic startups often fail. If an academic institution or an academic, actually, let's go back to my example of 3D printer. I'm speaking about this not now, almost 7-8 years back, when 3D printers was coming in. If that professor has approached a bank and say that I'm going to develop 3D printers and I need a loan to develop a large number of 3D printers, I'm almost confident that none of the banks will even give loan, because at that point of time, digital fabrication is a completely new world. Nobody knows about it. Nobody knows whether it's going to be successful even. So you won't get support if you are having that. So who will support it? That's basically where a new way of financing startups become an important thing. And I've seen that we will have a very detailed session on startup valuation and funding and things like that later. But what is this funding? I will just touch on that and I'll go further. I'll not go into the detail, but questions are there, I can take it up. So if something is very risky, naturally the return also will be higher, correct? So there are people who wanted a higher return. So what will they do? They are ready to give money, not as a loan, but as a partner in profit. That is basically what we call as investment. Now, why should somebody put money in a very risky venture? As I said, the returns are higher for that. He also wanted to ensure that it cannot be a 0-1 game, right? I get it or I don't get it. So to minimize his risk, he actually do what is known as a portfolio. It's like what we do in a share market, right? I won't buy one share and keep it. I will buy a set of shares, and if you are a smart share broker, I will buy it in such a manner that my portfolio is balanced. Depending upon the risk profile, your portfolio will be different. So you buy this. So you are trying to do this by looking at a combination of multiple companies, so that at the end, the portfolio as such will give me around 10 or 15 or 20% return. But each company, if successful, may give me 80% or 100% return. So the point is that I invest in 10 companies with the idea that even if 6 fail or 7 fails, I have no problem, because the other 3 will compensate for that loss. When you look from the other end, these 3 or 4 succeeds have to really give a large amount of return. That's why the startup have to be high growth, high value ventures. So they have to give you very high rate of return for the investor if it succeeds. And there are other elements. If there are other funding spaces also available. Now, where will we get these investors? Across India, you have investors available. But interestingly, some of the bigger towns, Bangalore, Hyderabad, NCR region, Bombay, where such professional investors are there. But please note, India is not a poor country in that manner. Even if you go to a remote part of India, you see people who are very rich. Even in a remote part of, we used to say that in a remote part of Kerala, for example, there are the number of Audis in a very remote village in Kerala is actually not decent. It's the same is true in many other places. So if a remote village in Kerala has got some 100 people owning Audis or Mercedes, that means there is a lot of wealth there, right? Only problem is they don't know how to channelize the wealth into a status person. Academics can actually play a role here, especially when most of our colleges have never used a very important resource called alumni. Let me give you an example here. In Kerala ecosystem, recently we did an audit, and we actually found that when we took just 5 engineering colleges, 5 batches of 5 engineering colleges who passed out between 81 and 86, sometime back, and we just did a survey among those people, and we found 5 engineering colleges, 5 batches. How much of their money today they have, which is disposable? Because there are some of them are in top positions, some of them are heading companies, some of them are for large business, etc. After all your normal requirements, everything, how much is your disposable savings? You don't mind leaving it. We found that 5 colleges, just 5 engineering colleges and 5 batches can actually pool disposable income of around 60,000 crores. Now, even if I take 10% of that, I'm speaking about 6,000 crores, which can actually be taken into the startup ecosystem. Now, remember, we have so many medical colleges, we have so many arts and science colleges, we have so many design colleges, law colleges, so many batches are there. If you take all of those alumni and start looking at their incomes they can dispose and take 1% of it, you actually have resources to support your startups. Colleges have never ever looked at alumni as something. What we use alumni for? We ask them to build an auditorium, we may ask them to build maybe sometimes to give scholarships and things like that, if at all. But if you started using alumni as a very important resource to provide financial and guidance, the startups can actually fly to the next level. The growth and failure is the other element. Many parts of India, failure is not accepted. There are places where it is accepted, they are growing very fast. Startups have got failure, but in Kerala, for example, it's a society which is very not at all tolerant to failures. We actually, in the startup policy, brought a line saying that entrepreneurs never fail, only enterprises fail. Because we believe that enterprises can fail, but entrepreneurs still succeed. The other 2 challenges are the market challenges and the enterprise development challenges. And finally, how an incubator or a ecosystem players work on the sustainability. So given this, how do we, an academic system, solves this? So we actually believe that the ecosystem can play by in 6 ways. And this is the same, I will show how Kerala has done it. I'm not saying that Kerala has done a great job or best job, but each state has got, or each location has got its own challenges. We have developed a model based upon our challenges. And I'm sure that this chief, for example, Kerala don't have a large industrial hub, so which actually will drive the startup ecosystem. So it is substantially, it has to be driven by the academic institutions or by the government. That may not be the case in some other part of India, say, like, for example, Karnataka or Maharashtra. That may not be the case. There will be good industrial ecosystems which will drive that. So that fine tuning will have to do it. But we can actually play a key role in this. So what are those elements of building? The first, you need to create a motivation. And that's basically where the inspiration comes into picture. And this is something which has to happen in the colleges. We need to actually inspire the spirit of entrepreneurship and knowledge-based enterprises. Making money is important. And enterprises which you are speaking about all have to make money. But making money using the knowledge, using what you've learned, what has been taught, what the college can provide, what academic system can provide, that is basically where the sustainability comes. And that inspiration and showing the good stories of it, bringing people who have done great from the colleges, bringing poster boys in the colleges, in the localities around, and see that they have done it with all the constraints which others have. These are all will be the way of inspiring. And our experience is that if we can acknowledge this, we can actually celebrate the success. We can actually showcase the people. In fact, I was in Gujarat government's SSIP conference last year. And I was so impressed that the Honorable Minister actually mentions about the startups, in college startups in his speech. So which basically means that the minister of the state actually acknowledges and recognizes the type of development which is happening in a college by a startup. That's a huge recognition. That inspires another 100 students of the college to do it. So celebrating success is an important thing. In fact, we used to say that in India, except a few places, we always say that this guy has won first rank, this white guy has won some award in sports and things like that. We have never said that from this college, this student has actually developed a product which is now being used by many large number of people. So that inspiration comes when you show that. So that is the first model that ecosystem can provide, the colleges can provide. The second, which is very important, because knowledge-based economy, the places where you have to use the knowledge requires good amount of education. Somebody tells that you can, your success is by failing in a course rather than winning, passing in a course. I don't believe in that, because colleges provide networks, colleges provide knowledge, and people who have dropped out from colleges and become successful, all of them are great learners. They may not have studied there, but they have learners. So educate is another important thing. The need for an IP-based startups, how you actually create intellectual properties, how do I translate the lab into field, which I discussed earlier. And you also need business skills. Some part of the world, some part of the country, this comes naturally. People will know how to look at from the profit point of view, look at all elements of the business, etc. Some other part of India, it may not be. For example, in Kerala, the students who come out from good business, good product ideas, technical ideas, have no clue about whether the customer is interested in that or not. So unless your product has got value to customer, somebody has to buy it, profit when you sell it, and you also require people who make it. Only then it can actually be successful. So providing skills, providing knowledge, business, all these things are a part of education. But more often than not, rather than lectures like this, what we are doing, if for the students, if it is an inspirational way of doing it, is like actually making them to do the business will actually help them to educate better. The third level is experiment, which is where the colleges can provide a very, very important role. We many times we speak about innovation, right? We speak about innovation. We speak about saying that people have to come out with new products, people have to make new things. But how do they do it? So they have to actually be allowed to experiment. They should be allowed to use our laboratories. They should be allowed to do the facilities. They should be allowed to work on if it is fab labs or design shops or other elements. Try to experiment. In the experimentation, you fail. That's why it's called experiment, right? Experiment can fail. So, in other words, the first three layers of an ecosystem is more at the academic institutions: inspiration, knowledge and skills, and experimentation. And please note, this is not limited to incubation centers. This is limited to the college-wise culture. We have some great examples in the state, in the country, where such things have happened. So once you have that, and this can happen through their education, you actually come out with good product, which can now be scaled to next level. That's basically where we start with launch and grow and establish. So in the launch, we need incubators. What do an incubator do? Fine tune the product, fine tune these business models, try to actually connect it with the right vendors, right IP providers, right support systems, scale up the solutions, provide grants. They require money. Providing the grants, small grants, either from the funding agency of the incubator, or there's a large number of granting agencies in the country. Connect with them. If push to the model of patents, we know that academic institutions are good for publications. Publications and patents are opposite to each other. If I publish, then I cannot patent. But you can patent and then publish. That's possible. So you basically push them to patent it, then help them to sweat that. So that's basically where you speak about launch. Then we help them to grow. So that means they have to go into a large ecosystem, something like I have in Ahmedabad or Startup Oasis in Rajasthan, Startup Mission in Kerala, T-Hub in Hyderabad. These are all places which helps for non-linear growth, which actually support the non-linear growth, accelerators, business support, and things like that. Finally, help them to create the enterprise development by linking with large business environment. Could be large industries, government. Some areas you can connect with industry, some areas you can connect with government. In the first three elements of ecosystem, there is a direct role for academic institutions. In the next three layers, the academic entrepreneurs or incubation system will have a more of a facilitating role. The first is direct role, facilitating role. If you have this whole, you are primarily cracked the entire DNA of the startup ecosystem per se. A student who is coming to the colleges, if they get inspired, they are educated and their necessary skills are there, they experiment their ideas in a very controlled environment, they move to an incubator where a lot of risk has been taken care of, they are actually being honed, they are actually being polished, and then they grow and they can make impact for startups. Just in Kerala, for example, just to give you a full picture of what we do, quickly I say, but we actually do a lot of events in the first stage, because the organization which I represent is a statewide agency for promotion of entrepreneurship, technology entrepreneurship. But it started as an incubator. But so we believe that a state like Kerala requires a more element of inspiration because Kerala by nature is not very entrepreneurial. Even though Kerala may be, but Kerala as a state is not very entrepreneurial. So you need to actually drive this point again and again, saying that this is not, this is something very exciting, this is very useful, this is something which can actually give you good returns, this is something make your life very nice, and not only for not only to the not only to potential startups, but to potential investors, saying the startups could be a good. So you need to evangelize, you need to inspire the investors, you need to inspire the parents, you need to even inspire the teachers. And even within that, you need to have gender equality. So you need to push more into that because women in general are not very open to entrepreneurship. So how do you actually increase the women participation in that, minority participation in that? These sort of things are actually something we need to specifically start looking at, especially when you are looking at social equity and gender equity. So all those things comes under the inspiration. We do it through programs. For education, just like in many of your colleges, especially as I said, Gujarat is doing a fantastic job in this. We have in around now it's around 250 colleges. We set up innovation cells where we allow students to experiment, provide small grants to them. So colleges can actually drive innovation programs, idea challenges, etc. 80% of them will not come out anything, but it actually create the drive of people to do something. We used to do it from the schools itself. So we call our Future Sparks program. In school itself, we started doing. Today, we call it as an Young Innovators program, where the school itself we started doing. And try to bring some international connects. That's where the design summer schools which we do. And with MIT, Kerala government has got a tie-up with Massachusetts Institute of Technology to set up a fabrication academy, digital fab labs. So digital fab labs help them to educate in digital fabrication. Similarly, we tied up with Unity on XR, IBM on blockchain and things like that. The third layer, the play or the experiment layer, is basically where we provide labs where people can actually work with their ideas. Many of them may be successful, some of them may be failures. No problem, because your cost of doing that is very low. And then for launch, we create incubators. We have, as of now in Kerala, there are 5 cities. We provide that. We provide innovation grant up to around 12 lakhs, provide seed fund grant up to another 15 lakhs, patent, R&D support, link with financial institutions and others for support further. Grow accelerator programs, market exposure programs, bring them to international business trips, etc. And Kerala being a place where not too much industries are there, the startups have been exposed more with the government. So government has got a model that government become an early marketplace for them. So government procure directly from the startups to do that. Now those things are very, very nuanced to specific ecosystems. It may not be relevant in all the contexts. But in general, the inspire, educate, experiment, launch, grow, and impact can actually be the way an education ecosystem can actually get developed. And that's basically because from a startup entrepreneur, from a student or an academic intern, there's this transformation and a skill enhancement and an entrepreneurship mindset. They need to work various stages of growth. They need to focus on quality, they need to focus on time management, they need to grow on delivery robustness, expansion, packages, batches, growth, all those very elements of growth is needed for an entrepreneur person. Typically, innovative products generally follow this sort of a pattern. From an ideation, I'll explain what is written in blue later, to proof of concept, to validation and enterprise. Each of these require a different type of support. That's what is written in blue. So, for example, in the ideation stage, you may require boot camps, idea days, or idea hackathons. You require small idea grants for people to do it, training programs, laboratories to do it. All these things comes into the ideating phase. It's a funnel. maybe thousands of people ideate, few will go into the prototyping phase, which is converted into prototyping. In our context, we actually try to do an international immersion, virtually or physically, and we also provide extensive mentoring and focus on IP creation. These things focus on the proof of concept. Proof of concept convert into a minimum viable product. That's basically where you require a little bit more support. Customer has to validate, saying that this is something which I will buy. Early marketplaces are required. Business needs are required. Connect with the external ecosystem is required. From there, we need to go for the next one. That's basically where the investors have to come in. Seed funds, equity fund, the fund, the angels, venture capitalists, etc., come into picture out there. And finally, you provide business support and policy support. Our experience is that this area is basically where the college or academic startups should play a big role. This first area, the ideating proof of concept, minimum viable product, that has to happen in the colleges. And ideally, the R&D, the dark fiber in the colleges have to be connected so that actually lead to come out with interesting product and services per se. So just to give you a practical example of the same company which I was mentioning earlier, how the ecosystem actually supported this company across this period as such. As I said, a small village in North Kerala, there is an entrepreneurship and innovation cell where the students have come out with something like a Iron Man suit. That's basically where they started. So the college teacher, the professor has actually motivated them. There's small funding from the government, very, very small funding, they developed it. So with wearing the suit, a very crude thing, the student can actually lift 100 kg in his hand. It's an exoskeleton. In 2017, a picture like this came in the newspaper. I discussed this, and that was actually being floated as a problem. And this company called Gen Robotics started with 2 lakh investment from us, from the government. 2 lakh grant, small amount. But being a very, very valuable problem, BPCL actually given more grant, connected with the investor because, as I said, it's a very large problem. So there is a very huge possibility. So fund of fund came. The water department found that this is a problem which could be solved. So they created a water innovation zone and provided technical expertise. And in 2018 February, the first product launched. And the person whose picture is here is actually standing behind the chief minister over there. Same person has done. So world's first manhole drain cleaning robot was launched. 2018 October, Honorable Prime Minister launched this nationally. And today, it is a little dated, 2019, they become a 200 crore company in 5 states. Today, I think they are actually operating in 12 states. Last year, many of you may be knowing Professor Mashelkar. Anjani Mashelkar Award is a very, very coveted for social entrepreneurship. This is the company which won the last year for that. So there are such stories we can bring in many. But what I wanted to stress is that it's possible that anything which happens in an academic institution can be scaled up provided we have an ecosystem which basically support that. So with that, I think my time is up. So let me stop. If you have some questions, of course, some nuances can actually be answered when you have questions. So when you have questions, I will be happy to take any questions related to the discussion today.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. So actually, like we do have a from this interesting event, we do have a few questions from audience as well.
Please.
Yes. So I would like to start with the first question. That is, one person asked, like, when is the right time for startups to get funded?
Oh, good question. Now, there are different ways of funding in the whole life cycle of a startup. So, very early stage, when you are still in an idea stage, it's important that you need to get either a grant or what we call as a friend and faith capital. So basically, that's at very, very early stage. Ideally, it should be a grant because that's a stage where the idea, it's only an idea has still not been matured, and they may have to actually come out with some sort of a viable product. Now, once you have a viable product and you have some level of a customer validation, that's the time when you start looking at an angel funding or an early stage, not a VC, but an angel funding as such. Typically, if it is more of an R&D product, then there are R&D funding available. Just to take an example, if it is a biotech product, a biotech product generally take a long time to become a viable product. So most of the investors may not wait till that point of time. So they don't look at an early stage biotech product. So in such a case, you need to actually look at who is funding that. For example, BIRAC has got big grants which provide you that. In some of the states, Kerala, for example, we actually provide up to 1 crore as a loan if it is a socially relevant project. So such schemes will be available. You need to start looking at it. So grants, small grants, CSR funds or other grants in the next stage. Then comes the real investment sort of a thing. But when you go for investment, please ensure that it is a product which has got a non-linear growth. If there is not a non-linear growth, but you have an asset, go for a debt funding. If it is a non-linear growth, go for a angel funds. And that once you have an angel fund with you, then the angel fund itself will ensure that they will take you to the next cycle, maybe a Series A or Series B and that sort of a thing. So, so the answer is that depending upon the product and the nature and the life cycle, we need to actually start looking at it.
Sure, sir. And sir, also we have another question. So that is like how much market research is required to prove one's POC. So like if you have a product-based startup or you have a you can say service-based startups. So they both are two different categories. So like what should be a perfect market research for that particular both of the segments so that one can apply for POC too and an incubation or something like that.
Yes. See, we don't speak about Steve Jobs, right? Because most of us are not Steve Jobs. So we need to actually look at something which product which market wants, rather than something which we ensure that market will buy. That is very rare. So it's important that, and technology institutions and technology startups primarily have this problem that they actually don't many times read the customer properly. They don't even look at customers' point at all. They keep on developing the product, and at some stage when they go and want to sell to the customer, they have a problem. That's why the design thinking becomes a very important element in the early stage of the design, the product development itself. So market research is extremely important, not only to assess how much this will sell, but also to understand what are the gaps existing in the market and how do our innovation actually solve that. Now, I used to say that in India, if you take most of the products, the people who don't have the product or who do not have access to the product or who may not buy a particular product category is more than the people who buy that. Which means if you can actually innovate and unclog that market, you have a large space there, right? So that is something which is there, which can actually happen from an academic system, because you have such a large blue oceans of opportunity in front of us. If I can actually make a low cost product, which can actually solve current problems, you will unlock a market. So market research is not only to look at how much my product will sell, but also to understand what are the gaps in the market and innovate my product.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, actually, as you told that design thinking is like a really necessary part of innovation. Like if you are starting from the basic. So, as we don't have any like relevant subjects related to design thinking and academia, so I just wanted to ask, like, again, what kind of activities like should we encourage among the people or students, or you can say people from college, to develop that particular design thinking mind, and you can say to get the band of an innovative side of the student.
Yeah, see, your point is very valid because see, we are more of I mean, it's maybe my theory, maybe I'm wrong, but as a country, we started thinking about making finished products only very recently. As a country, we were always looking at making components. The final products may be made in other parts of the world and things like that. Now with Make in India, and today we are speaking about Made in India, made for the world, that's basically where we started looking at the final product the customer will buy. We were not adopting designs. We are start looking at our own designs first. And that is a context where people have to be empathizing with the customers. Design thinking is all about empathizing with the customer. Some of the faculty members know that the story goes that the person who has invented CTC machine, the CT scan machine, at some point of time found that it is actually a product which a kid will be afraid to get in. And I don't know any of you have gone to a CT scan machine. It's not a very pleasurable experience to be there. So he started asking that why should you're already a patient? Why should the patient be put more duress? Because he never thought it from a patient point of view. He always thought it from a doctor's point of view to get a very accurate functional product. More often than not, we do that. So we actually look at more from a functional point of view. So this is necessary for the students to think from the customer and user's point of view. Then only you will actually get products which can actually go into the next level. And that's basically where the incubation centers, when a person comes in with an idea, we not only go through a business canvas and things like that, product development process or the service development process have to have a very, very strong component on the design thinking. Design thinking is not a lecture anyway. Just to go through a hands-on show. There are interesting tools to do that. IDEO is one of them. Many others are doing that. So that process has to be a part of your induction program itself.
Sure, sir. And sir, like recently you said that product development, people usually should go from a user side of a view to develop that particular product. And I believe like that is the main reason like people fail when they are making a product-based startup, or you can say they are starting their product-based startup. They usually fail because of this only because they don't have that user side of perspective. So like again, like what should be done to avoid that particular situation, or you can say particular thing in a startup if they are starting their startup in a particularly product-based thing?
Yeah, see, there are some myths, especially among startups, especially academic startups, is that it's the idea which is important, and they believe that if I share my idea with somebody else, then gone. But it's natural that a lot of people get a similar idea, but only one person will be able to translate that into a final product. So idea is not the key winner. Key winner is the execution. So it's important for the incubator or the academic institution to dispel this myth, saying that no, don't share with others. In fact, we used to say today that the world is now moving so fast because we are sharing, and we can actually start taking inputs from a lot of people about my product or my service. And the market is so large that as long as you are doing an innovation and you are not doing an imitation, market is so large that even if another person makes it, it's material because you still have a market. So these are the mindset changes which you need to do. Because again, in our country, our challenge is that even though we have grown fast in the last 30 years, maybe 1990s onwards, we still keep that pre-1990 mindset. Pre-1990 mindset is that you have to have a high level of a competition. I can get business only if I take it from somebody else, sort of a thing. That has to be broken. And the induction programs in academic incubators, in incubators in general, actually have to break this and say that you have a large market in front of you. Collaborate, ensure that your ideas to be shared with people, take the feedback, look at who is ready to pay for it, because customer is not the one who you give free and take it. They are not customers. So many times people do a product and then give samples and say that okay, I have a good traction. Somebody has to pay for it. Pay for it. That's basically where the real customer traction comes. So those elements have to be driven into the thing. And business is much more serious than doing a job. That and it's not that I did not get a job, so let me start a business. Not so. You have to be very, very serious about it, and you need to be a lot of rigor in that. And that rigor can actually be brought in from incubator. In fact, some of you may be knowing there is a incubator which is started by two co-founders of Infosys called Acceleron. So they used to say that in a 6 months, we actually completely transform the person because we put very strong targets. We actually have a very high rigorous program into that. So that is something which is required, especially when you get to the incubation space. Before that, the education, the experimentation, etc., is relaxed. The moment you get into incubation and acceleration, it has to be really a very serious and very rigorous.
Sure. So as you are mostly focusing on the incubator system and everything, so like I wanted to ask from myself that what should be an institute's role for a person who is having an idea and if they want to start their own business? So like what should an institute do from their side, particularly their side, to promote this kind of things in their uh, college or you can say university?
Okay, there are quite a few things institutions can do. See, there are two ways you can do. One is the institution's IP, which get transferred to the views. That's not what we are speaking about. What we are speaking about is a student or a person comes with an idea and what institution can do that, right? Now, when you have an idea, the institution is able to sort of distill that idea, provide the infrastructure support. Infrastructure support, I don't mean that space alone. The space is the least concern today. But you have other things, right? You have software support, you need to have hardware support, you may have to have faculty support, you may have to have testing facility support. And more than that, institutions also can create linkages because you have alumni linkages, you have institutional linkages. Because any enterprise development is not an isolation. It requires all these factors. And rather than an innovator or an entrepreneur going and uh, moving to each of these things, an institution has got much more leverage to do that. Because institution, typically, if you are at least 10 years old, you have a large alumni base. So these alumni many of them are in different positions. They can actually help you in many of these things. So that is basically where the ecosystem means. But unfortunate case is that in many cases, I'm saying it's not the rule, but in many cases, what happens is that the incubation centers of academic institutions are not integrated with the academic institution. It's just another activity. That's a problem.
Yes,
And I think that is basically where maybe and in some of the IITs and IIC, Institute of Science, etc., these are settled in solved because faculty also be a part of the company itself. The faculty also take a stake in that. It could be a sweat equity or it could be another, but many other places that is not allowed. So unless the faculty has a stake in it, and they will also be a part of the company, you have a chance. In Western world, you can actually take off from your academics, be a director of a company, and then come back. You set up a company and come back. There are many academicians who have set up multiple companies, and that is something which actually help. So private institutions and private universities can actually start thinking about whether you can allow that. In Kerala, we came out with a concept, but of course, it has not taken off. Is that if a faculty take part in a startup and take leave from his or her job to help the startup grow, we actually provide them a scholarship, a fellowship. Not a scholarship, a fellowship. But the unfortunate part is that we still have not solved this issue that a faculty can take leave and work on a company. That is still not solved. So once that is solved, this works very well. But that I think over the time period, it happened. And even ACT now speak about academic entrepreneurship as an important element. So ACT's policies now speak about academic entrepreneurship. So the moment academic entrepreneurship and the IP of the colleges, we see a lot of good products coming out from our academic system.
definitely, sir. And I like as you said that people should have an equal stake in, like if you're from institute side, from an incubation side, and from the people who are having their own ideas, they should have equal stake in, like if they are starting something new. So yes, I truly believe in that. So like it
That
was like
also is the important thing is because many times we also find this as a challenge that academic incubation centers are generally funded by one of the government agencies, maybe DST or Niti Aayog or maybe the state government. So and typically these are for time. So you are going to support for n number of years, and after that they are supposed to be there. More often than not, you find they are never become independent. So that is important because they still become a dependent. So it's very important that if you are mentoring startup, you should be a startup yourself, right? You have a classic example of a company called Numa. Numa is a an incubator from government of France. It's a French government incubator, started in Paris or I think Paris. It actually did exactly what we are doing, but very soon it actually expanded itself into a global incubator. Today, Numa operates in India. Numa is not funded anymore by the government. They create their own funding mechanisms, their own mechanisms for it. So that is also important. While you are helping startups, the incubator also can actually become a self-sustaining model. There are many ways of doing it. You can actually look at taking a part of the IP if it is allowed, or taking a part of a success fee, take a part of equity, looking at doing projects. All those are possibility of creating a sustainable model for the incubators, which is also an important element, which also gives a lot of depth to the people who are working in incubator on the real challenges of a startup.
And I definitely believe that like the networking is like really mandatory for all this. Like if you are saying that as an alumni person, if they have their own startup, they need to have a, you can say, time to time connection with the institute itself.
Yes. Yes.
So
In fact, in IIMK, and I'm sure this is happening in IIM Ahmedabad, also in many other institutes. IIMK, for example, the alumni has created an angel fund, angel group, so that they say that we have pooled in resources. Now we have a corpus which we will invest in companies which is coming out of IIMK. So such angel groups can form in most of the colleges. That's possible. Second thing is your networking becomes very important. No? You have an alumni, a senior alumni running a chemical company. He or she can actually support similar type of startups coming from that. And people will be very, very close. They will be happy to associate with the future companies from there. In fact, we were pleasantly surprised when we actually showed to alumni that in one of the engineering colleges, there were around 18 IPs which has been granted but not being used. So they said we are very happy to support all these startups who are going to work on that. And I'm sure this is true in most of the colleges.